you keep using the word business. I just realized this. I don't even really think of I don't think of what I'm doing as a business. Mm-hmm. I just think this is just what I do.
Right.
This is who I am. There's no bridge.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to call it.
Right.
There's no vacations and days off and sick time. It's just, I just do what I do at all times in all places. Yeah. We're back.
I thought I'm supposed to be back.
I'm going to shut up and let you be the host.
What's going on, guys? We are definitely back. We're in episode 5, so we're super pumped about today's episode. We're going to have fun with this. We're going to dive deep into the business world. With the Dialed In podcast, each week we're just wanting to talk about a different topic, from life to business, finance, Obsessed Garage, as well as Obsessed Home Theater. And these things are just going to resonate with both of us because that's what we get excited the most about, but it'll resonate with a lot of you as well.
Hopefully.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
You're confident?
I'm 100% confident, man.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm not as confident on that.
Well, we're going to have some fun.
I assume no one's listening and everybody thinks it sucks.
And that might be true. But
I like doing it, and that's all that matters.
As long as we're having fun, I think they'll have fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's dive into it. So today we're talking about how Obsessed Garage went from a side hustle to an empire. And you may not see it as an empire.
Or shackles, whatever you want to call it.
Us on the outside looking in, it's been neat, Matt, watching your journey over, because I've known you, I guess, about 4 or 5 years. And you've been doing this for about 9 years, so there's a lot I didn't see. But it's been interesting, just me on the outside looking in, watching you build this and grow this and expand it. And as a business owner myself, and last week you even said, I don't own a business because it's just me.
I'm good at insulting people.
So that was pretty funny, but it makes sense. I've never made that leap of faith. I've never taken that next step to hire employees, to begin to grow, because that's a whole nother challenge. That's a whole other adventure. Doing it by yourself, in a way, is easy. Yes, there's more work, but I don't have to worry about the stresses that you have to worry about. And so I'd love to dive in pretty deep today, and get into just some areas that I think will just generate some really great discussion when talking about that. So let's kind of back up at the beginning. What was maybe the original spark that led you to start Obsessed Garage? Like, where did this thing all begin?
Well, everybody knows the story of diagnosis with obsessive compulsive disorder and struggling and setting up the camera and talking to it. At one point, there was a couple of things that I always said to Michelle, that kind of late night discussion. You're like, man, I think I'm destined for something great. Am I supposed to become the CEO of Merrill Lynch someday? Should I not be discounting my future and just kind of get comfortable? I always felt uncomfortable if I was ever comfortable, right?
Right.
And then the other thing with Obsessed Garage was, I think I'm on to something here. So when I had maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people, subscribed on the YouTube channel, and I'm getting, lots of feedback on the car forums as I'm posting and sharing my journey on building my cars and all the different products and things I'm using, I always felt like, man, I'm just on to something here. And so because I felt like I was on to something, my channel wasn't monetized. I didn't even know what that was in the beginning. Sure. It was just, I wasn't monetized. I didn't monetize until I get like 80,000 followers.
Okay.
And so the channel wasn't monetized, so it wasn't making any money. I didn't have any affiliate accounts or anything like that set up. The channel was called Matt Mormon, not Obsessed Garage. But I was getting, funny story, and I've told this many times, I don't know that you've ever heard this, but at Merrill Lynch, they allowed us to build a FA.com website, so financialadvisor.com site. And so you'd go to Merrill Lynch and you'd search by zip code, and then each office would have each of the advisors, their website. It was only allowed to be one page. It was a one-page site, and there were only 2 sections that you could write a bio. So it was Matt Mormon, CFP, SEMA, CRPC, CHFC, CLU. I had 32 letters behind my name.
I love it.
And I was, senior vice president. I think I was probably just vice president at the time.
Right.
I was resident director, vice president. So I was the manager of the office, and then I was a vice president. And so I'm making all these videos on the side, thinking I'm onto something. And the confirmation of that was, at one point, I got called from Merrill Lynch marketing, and they said, "What are you doing to get so many hits on your FA.com?" They said, there are 16,000 advisors. I was number 2. Okay. Taylor Swift's dad, Scott Swift, as a Merrill Lynch advisor, was number 1. And I was pretty close behind him on the amount of hits or people searching for Matt Moorman, Merrill Lynch.
Right.
Right. It was a terrible website, but people were searching for my site. And so I'm like, man, I'm really onto something. And so it was at that point I decided to build ObsessedGarage.com, or build a website. Okay. I wanted to call it that'sjunk.com.
Right, yeah.
I couldn't get that URL, and I'm glad I didn't.
I was about to say, do you miss that? Do you think that was a missed opportunity, or that was, I'm really glad?
I think I'm glad, because he wouldn't have gotten the joke, the stupid inside joke, and so, ObsessedGarage.com, I got that site. And my buddy from church, Steven Salto, he made the logo on the very first pass. Just that logo. Wow. Just made it on the very first pass, and then set me up on WordPress and turned me loose.
Nice.
And so then I was spending 30, 40, 50 hours a week aggregating 2 things. I made a This Is Me series, which was 13 episodes of me telling my life story and everything I'm about.
Sure.
And then so I wanted an about page. And then I wanted, so I could send people that were looking for me to find who I was. Because I found myself on the phone half the day just talking to people and telling them my story.
Yeah.
So I needed to do that at scale.
Right.
And then an aggregation of all the products I was using, because I didn't want to put the links in every video. It was too annoying.
Yeah.
What the smart thing would do is just make generic links and just copy and paste in the videos. But I felt like I needed to make specific links in each video. Yeah. And so that's when I created ObsessedGarage.com, was to be able to aggregate all that stuff. So that's when the side hustle really began in the beginning. Yeah. So the first year and a half or 2 years, it was just me doing me, Matt Moorman on YouTube, just sharing the ownership experience of my cars to get it out of my own head, to maybe make some relationships.
So even the side hustle part of it, you began to grow this business.
It was an accident.
But it really wasn't like, were you making money at that point at all?
No, it wasn't intentional. So the side hustle became a side hustle unintentionally.
Okay. I see.
So I don't know that I could really provide advice to people if you were being intentional about it. Like, how would you even do that? Right. So the circumstances, that I'd have a fork at the road, and I would just choose a path, and another fork at the road, and choose the path. Yeah. And so those forks in the road happen for all of us. Yeah. And so I had a fork that turned into parallel roads, right, where I thought that eventually, when I figured out I'm onto something here, I thought that it was going to be my way to manage Car Guy's money. So I could stop doing the marketing that I was doing at Merrill Lynch. I eventually left Merrill Lynch and went to Raymond James. And that's when I really doubled down on, again, Obsessed Garage was always going to be a side hustle. Once I figured out that I was side hustling, Obsessed Garage was the side hustle. Yeah. Obsessed Wealth Management was the business, and I needed to create a bridge
between those two, sure.
Or so I thought.
Right.
And my coaches would never tell me this, but eventually I figured out there is no bridge. It's just me.
Yeah, just sharing your life.
That there is no parallel road to connect. There's just one road. And so that's when eventually, that and another comment where when I eventually started selling stuff on Shopify, and I said, man, what if I sold like 50 of these pressure washers? Right. And he said, what if you sold 5,000? And then that changed the course of my life forever.
Sure.
So the side hustle was never really intended. And we can dig into more. Eventually getting fired, the side hustle became the main hustle because I was forced to make that decision, to make that choice. Yeah.
And I can definitely relate to that, because I went in starting YouTube like 7 years ago, just sharing my passion for home theater. I didn't know I knew you could get monetized, but I didn't think I would ever be at a point where I'd make anything significant, And so it's interesting just seeing how you weren't intentionally striving to build an empire. to build a side hustle, it just kind of along your path, like you said, you would come to a fork in the road and go, okay, which road do I take? Mm-hmm. And each one of those roads have led you down the path to success where you're at now, which is, to me is just super cool. So
each one of those forks, not to cut you off, but each one of those forks, there was like a gun turret and barbed wire and the stuff I had to climb over and through as well. By the way, we can dig into that a little more detail, but there was always opposition. Friends, family, people following along on YouTube, just infinite opposition.
Sure.
Getting, under heavy fire, landmines and razor wire and all the potential problems.
Yeah. So when you think about people that go into business, I think those that are going to be successful are willing to endure the scars through it. You know, climbing over the barbed wire, falling down on your face.
Or if you're lucky enough, you're just naive to it and you don't know any other way.
You don't know how bad it's going to be, and you just go for it anyway.
Yeah, because if somebody told you, and I've said this many times, if I sat down and wrote a business plan 100%. For Obsessed Garage, you would have never succeeded. You needed these forks in the road. You needed the circumstances. You needed the razor wire in order to create what you're eventually intended to create. You also need to be very real with yourself, very honest with yourself as well. I think that's very important.
Is that part of self-awareness, like just knowing who you are, what you're capable of?
Or in some cases not knowing who you are, but understanding you're not sure yet and you're willing to go find that out.
Yeah. And that's been a part of your whole story, whether it's finding out the products that you want to carry or finding out where you're going in business. Even over the past year, I've watched you even kind of reframe Obsessed Garage, because before it was Obsessed Garage, and then well, wait a minute, now there's kind of like this Obsessed Engineering, and then now there's Obsessed Builds and Obsessed Home Theater, and man, what if it's just all obsessed?
And there's no bridge.
Right.
It's all one road.
Because initially when we were talking about going into business together for Obsessed Home Theater, it was kind of like, we're eventually going to have us and our employees, and you have you and your employees. But as you and Rusty and me, and we begin to look at this, and it's like, but it's just all obsessed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that is interesting that you're removing those bridges and going, okay, this is just who we are. This is what we're about. I don't know enough about cars, but I'm learning. And that's part of this podcast is, I'm asking genuine questions that I want to know. I want to dive in deep to Matt Moorman and your thought process. And I think the questions that we ask and the conversations that we have are going to resonate with folks watching.
I hope so.
So let's go to the next one. So what was there a specific moment when you realized that the garage and detailing was more than just a hobby?
I find that word hobby deeply insulting. It's like the only word that triggers me, where, some people are just real soft, right?
You got a handful of trigger words though.
Yeah, I do. Okay.
You do.
Yeah. So hobby is, I can't relate to that. Hobby is very casual to me.
Sure.
And I'm just not a very casual individual. When you're obsessed with something, you're very intentional, or you're very driven or focused, or you head toward that.
Right.
And so a hobby to me is something like I can just kind of turn it on and off whenever I want. And this is not turn on or offable.
Yeah.
Right. You can't turn it on and off. It's just innate. So again, back to those comments of like, man, I think I'm destined for something great, and then just seeing results from effort that made no sense to anybody, didn't even really make that much sense to me. So I didn't lead with a result, but started to see results. One result is people are interested. They're reaching out to you.
Yeah.
There's a cause and effect. I need some relationship in my life. Let me put myself out there. Then you start to discover what an odd bird you are and how much different you are. So the big inflection point, of course, was the OCD event where I shifted from arrogance and superiority to broken and unique, right?
Yeah.
And so when I dropped that, I'm better than, people are lazy, they're fat, they're stupid, or whatever. When it was about them and when really, or I thought it was about them, and when I realized it was really about me and how I'm being, and that you're sort of conditioned to keep things to yourself. And this is what's gotten me in trouble a lot with, say, 50% of the world, is half the people get it when you talk straight, the other half doesn't.
Right.
And so when I was superior and arrogant, that wasn't outward. I wasn't outwardly superior or outwardly arrogant, other than maybe to my wife or something like, this person has a crappy car, they suck at life, they're poor, they're stupid, whatever.
Right.
It was more of a inward, but that's how I thought.
Okay.
And so people can smell that on you.
Yeah.
And so despite the fact that I talk very straight, I don't believe that. I don't have that. Like I'm very aware of the yin and yang of the advantage that being this way gets me, but the equal but opposite disadvantage is a balancing out. It's like a barbell, right? Where you have all the weight on either side with nothing in the middle, you know. And so that discovery process has been really important as an inflection point to figure out, what am I doing here?
Yeah. I know as we grow as business owners, as you grow Obsessed Garage, and even personally, financially, it's easy for somebody on the outside looking in to think Matt's lost touch with the rest of the world. Do you ever get that?
Everybody.
I know my channel, they do. They're like, oh, well, Michael's at this point in his theater room, but he forgets what some of us are at. We're at the entry level. So how do you work through that?
I'm always
like, how do you stay in touch with the pulse of the community, the garage community? Because you're at a different place financially than I am, than somebody watching.
I think you can care too much about the community and not focus on the thing that you're good at. I think that can be an inflection point on the negative side. Like, I don't want to say I don't care about the community, but I just don't think about the community. I don't think about the people that are watching. I don't think about, we talked about this the other day, audience.
Right.
I don't really consider that. I don't even really consider that from a customer perspective. Like just today, I'll give you an example. I was making a video yesterday on our new tool packages, right? And it took me about 30 minutes to figure out like how to buy the tool package I already own, right? I already have it, so I'm not buying it. But if I was going to buy it, because I was making a video trying to tell people how to go buy it, and then I'm looking at how Nick and Bryce and Tommy and Nathan kind of put it together, and it's a great framework. But I was struggling. It took me about 30 minutes, and this is me knowing it. I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on all these tools. I know it really well, and so then where I started to consider me as a customer, if I were going there, what would I want to experience? How would this make sense to me? I think this is my one talent in the world, is to figure that out. How do I present something in a fashion that would make sense to me? And then the result would be community. Right? So to me, community or numbers of people is a result. So I never think about that. I never think about them. I only think about how I would read something, how I would approach something. When I'm editing a video, it's how I would want to see the thing presented. I don't want the in-between words cut out. And that was the thesis from the beginning, was to never really consider that. Only think about what the best choice for either me as the muse or the situation at the time, and never really consider the masses. I think that's been a key component in this.
And that's definitely different. So do some people look at that and go, well, that's arrogant, or that's self-centered?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure a lot. Yeah,
he's
selfish,
only thinking about himself.
Yep.
But ultimately, I think you're saying, okay, and I've heard you say this many times in your videos, if I like this, if I get excited about this, if I'm obsessed about this, then there's probably others that will feel the same way. And so maybe that's your premise. It's like, look, I'm just going to chase excellence. And I'm going to find those awesome products. I'm going to find those products that look great, that have great fit and finish, that have great usability, great results. And if it's good enough for me, then it's going to be good enough for others.
Yep. That's the whole thing. And then the belief is that maybe, I won't be the only one that shows up,
I love it.
Maybe some other people will show up. And then I also have a firm belief in that, if you were, how many people have come up to you and said, man, I've been thinking about starting a YouTube channel. I made like 20 videos. I'm just trying to put it together. I'm like, well, the 20, how'd you get to 20? As soon as I got the first one done, ship it. Just put it up.
Right.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Get it done, and then we'll figure it out later.
That's right. That's right.
Oh man, this video is out of focus, but I could either have it or not. And some people are going to complain about it again. And so I'm doing that for a different result.
Right.
Or I'm doing that for creating the thing for what I intended to create, and then the result is a result. If you live in that transactional world where you're just thinking about the result at all times, I think that you end up, you're just chasing the transaction. You end up living too much for like right this minute. There needs to be some time and some focus on, the future, and making things sustainable.
I think when you look at business as a whole, when you're focused on those products, the service that you provide, then I think naturally that's going to generate those customers. It's going to generate the interest from those that are watching, whether it's our videos or they get your newsletter. But just being genuine, authentic, sharing real life. And I like it that you don't sugarcoat it. You let people know when it's junk. I'm a little bit more soft in my approach. If I don't like something, I'll say it in a very nice and gentle way, other than, this is hot trash, man, so you're a little bit more forward on that.
Yeah, I mean,
but that's true to who you are.
Right.
And that's true to who I am.
Right. That's very authentic, right? And so that's one of the things I think is really important is to be authentic, to have an authentic personality. It would be work then, and so you keep using the word business. I just realized this. I don't even really think of what I'm doing as a business. I just think this is just what I do.
Right.
This is who I am. There's no bridge.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to call it.
Right.
There's no like vacations and days off and sick time. It's just, I just do what I do at all times in all places. Yeah. And then the result is the result. And so I'm just realizing this. I never really even thought of this, like the business side of the bit. Like I'm not really doing business. I'm just doing me.
Yeah.
That there happens to be a business that's created from doing that.
I'm beginning to think this podcast is part therapy for you, Matt.
Yeah.
You're figuring out who you are.
Yeah.
I love it, man. But these are cool conversations that I know I'm enjoying, and I think others will enjoy too. So what was your first major success that made you think, man, this could actually work? Was there a single product that you kind of brought in once you began to move from this accidental side hustle to a business, which you don't really like business, but moving into the business world, was there one product that was like, wow, man, like, I know you mentioned I'm onto something with video, but what about the product side of it?
Well, I think it goes back much further than that. It goes back to learning how to sell. So my first real success in life, other than getting into Villanova, growing up, my parents just kind of let me do my thing. And so like I didn't have they didn't like check on me like how they would get my report card, but the report card was always just a result.
Right.
I didn't like bring a backpack with books home. I didn't take notes. I just showed up to class and just kind of figured it out. I half the time didn't do my homework. I didn't study. Never studied in high school. Never even opened a book. Didn't know when I first major exam in college, I'm like, what are these people doing? They're like cramming, studying.
That was me, man.
I had no idea. I'm like, what are they doing?
That's funny.
And so I did get into Villanova, but I didn't have like a lot of success in life. I was pretty good at volleyball in high school, but we were always kind of I I guess the culture, the whole town that I'm from, the culture is, you just take what you get. So there's my parents as well. We just get what we get, and that's what we get, and we make the best of it, and we save our money, and we do the right thing, and we get what we get, and that's how we get it. And so I got the grades that I got, and that's just how I got it. I didn't work hard for it. Just whatever I naturally had, that's what I naturally got.
Right.
I just did the minimum on that because I wasn't interested. I wasn't focused on it. And then I got into Villanova, and I wasn't even really focused on that. It's just kind of that's what I got. I got to the best school that I could get to by just getting whatever I was going to get. Without any intentionality, no discipline.
Yeah.
And so when I got the job, when I flunked fundamentals of electrical engineering, and I had to take a summer class, and I got the job selling, and the very first day when I sold something, I think it was that point in life, I'm like, wait a minute, there's no cap. There's no I have to work a certain amount of hours, and I only have so many hours. And the only way for me to get something better was to get a little raise on my hourly wage.
Right.
Now it's I get paid 16% of the profit. And by the way, they tell me what the most profitable things are.
Right.
And then I made a decision at that moment in time. Well, I'm not even going to look at the profit. I'm just going to look at what I like the most, and then my belief is that if I share with people what I believe to be the most excellent, then I'm going to be rewarded in the long run. So I went from a transactional life that most people would normally take the thing that pays you the biggest commission, the biggest spiff, and I made that decision. And I did that same thing when I went to wealth management. I chose to do, annuitized, so I chose to charge people a fee rather than to chase the commission.
Yep.
And I chose to do the same thing in Obsessed Garage. And so the very first product, to answer your question, was the Krenzel pressure washer. I didn't choose that because it had the most margin or was the most profitable. I chose it because it was my favorite thing in the world, and it was extremely underrepresented. So I thought I could provide a ton of value to people. Yeah. But I didn't even believe that. I just knew that I really did it kind of because I was kind of annoyed that too many people were asking me for all these links. And I'm like, I got to just put this together because I'm sending you to 12 different places and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then I got to support you after the fact. I'm like, because then they're like, well, that place doesn't have it anymore. Right. So where do I go next? Right.
And you become the resource.
Like, I got to just get this done. Let me just get this up here. I think I could put this together. And, but I never really even thought about the money. Like, what am I going to get from this?
Yeah.
I did the math, but it's almost like as I'm building the spreadsheet, I'm looking at the cost, the wholesale cost and the retail. I'm thinking about I'm not thinking that word business. I'm not thinking about profit or margin, although I'm calculating the percentage. I don't know that I believe it, and so I'm just kind of looking at, there's this innate thing where I'm just following the path. I'm not studying for school.
Right.
I'm not trying to get the best algebra grade. I'm not trying to get into Villanova. I'm just getting the results that I'm getting by following the innate gut reaction.
Right.
And the same thing with products and that inflection point. Same thing with selling, making these decisions like, let me just follow what's natural. My natural tendencies, I'm going to sell Eclipse, not Alpine, because Alpine has more margin and pays bigger spiffs. Right. I'm going to sell Eclipse head units because that's what I want to buy.
Right.
And so then doing the same thing with Krenzel, I'm not looking at the margin. I'm not looking at the numbers.
Yeah.
I'm not looking at them in the sense that from a business perspective, I'm just doing what comes natural.
Yeah.
And so that, that inflection point of, man, what if I sold 50? What if you sold 5,000?
Yeah.
That's where the big win can come in. But the biggest win was that very first inflection point of learning to sell, having a big success, and then making that life decision that I'm not going to live in a transactional world.
Yeah.
Of course, I didn't know that at
Right,
the time. Sure. I'm going to live in a world of do what I think is best, and then the world will reward me from here on out.
Yeah. I know when we started Obsessed Home Theater, some of the questions that I would get as we're unfolding this, and it's changing on my channel, because before I was just a reviewer, I was a content creator. And so now we're building this brand, building this business. And one of the questions was, are you only going to, sell those products that basically pay you the most? And I'm like, we're not even looking at, now we have to look at it in the sense of, does it even make sense financially
you can't
to go
lose
into
money.
business with this person or this brand? but not once in we only have 3 brands right now on the website. We got Kaleidoscape, we got JTR, and we've got just added Per Listen just this past week. And not one of those brands do we ever ask them, hey, what's our cut? Before we even have a conversation. It's like, these are products that we love. These are products that we approach and say, hey, we would love to sell your products because we believe in them. We like them. We love them. Oh, by the way, what are we talking here? And we're like, okay, can we make that work? That's like the last part of the conversation.
The tricky part for you in Obsessed Home Theater, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm like, so the Obsessed Garage path of the curating of products has been essentially rich guy who has lots of experience is providing the people information of the rich guy's information. Right. And whereas your path has been Youth Man Deals.
Right.
And so what's or at least that's the perception of what I've been doing. Rich guy has tried everything, and so that information is valuable. Yeah. And so we're going to kind of figure out what's the nuance with, say, this, this other obsessed entity in on the home theater space is, and I think it goes back to not transactional, but what do I want in my home theater, and why? Yeah. And then it would be great if you'd honor the source of that information, because I've tried a bunch of stuff and I have access to information that other people don't have.
And I think part of so I didn't have the resources financially like you did. You saw all these pressure washers and you're like, I'll just buy one of each and I'll test them and I'll play with them. Where I've had the benefit as a quote reviewer is I just reach out to the brand and say, hey, I'm interested in your product. Can you send that to me? And they'll send it to me for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And I just get to play with it and dive into it. And then I get to figure out, do I like this thing? And so I've got access to a ton of speakers over the years. I probably filmed 75 home theaters. So I've heard and seen and just experienced a lot. And so although I didn't buy those from, let's say I go to the $1 million Star Wars home theater. Well, I didn't have $1 million to build that, but I got to experience what does $1 million look like. And then through that, are there still products that maybe don't represent that category, but man, they get me pounding, like they get me excited. They get my heart racing because I just really like the experience that I get with those products, whether it's $1 million or $500 or somewhere in between.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all hope that the world beating product is like free.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you hope, but that's not how the world works generally.
Yeah.
And it's not always the most expensive either. Sometimes it's somewhere in between, but it's generally near the top. Yeah.
I've typically never found, I know when I buy something, now my wife is totally different. She buys the cheapest because it's the cheapest.
And I've had to make do with it.
I've had to
make it work.
No, she has to buy another one because it sucks and she has to buy it again. Yeah. So I'm training her over the years that, look, we may not chase the upper end and get the most expensive, because sometimes you do waste some money there, but I certainly don't want to buy just because of price.
I never really thought about that. I mean, the bottom up approach is like, well, let me just buy the cheapest and then the next cheapest and the next cheapest to find what's acceptable. I've always gone from the top. I know I want the best, right? And then what would I accept beneath that? Another pathway to take it would be, you could take it from the bottom up and say, I'm going to go, I'm going to start at the bottom and then kind of go, what is minimally acceptable, and then I'm going to live in that space. To me, that's not exciting. But that's not innate, and that's what we're talking about here. This innate, these innate pathways that lead you toward, you may lead you toward being a C-suite executive. That's where you're headed. Or may lead you toward just being the very best creative or very best practitioner. Most people that have a talent are best, like not becoming management or whatever, what I'm saying? Just executing and chasing that talent. Most people aren't served well in building a business,
I'm seeing that.
And so finding that pathway or finding what best suits you, and man, if everybody could figure that out in life, it'd be really great.
I've always reached out to people and helped them along their journey, especially this YouTube thing, and building a brand and a business, getting connected with other brands and different things. But there's some that I really believe, man, they would just make a better employee of somebody else. Like they're amazing at this or amazing at that. But for them to just build a business and a brand, that's really not, I don't think that's for everybody.
No, it's for almost no one. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I think finding out who we are, finding out where we want to go, and discovering along the way, like, I think it's awesome. We don't have to have it figured out at the beginning. We talked about it in previous episodes. It's like you figure it out as you go. You know, you mentioned today, you get to those forks in the road, and then you make a decision based on the information you have, based on the experience that you've had, and you trust your gut and you go with it. Mm-hmm. And as long as it's not like completely crushing, and honestly, even if the business failed because you made that one decision, I truly believe if you're a true entrepreneur, true business owner, you're going to find something else. You're going to start something else. Mm-hmm. You know, that shouldn't be the end. But ideally, you don't want to pick, you know, these all or nothing paths. I'm not a big fan of that because I don't want to lose everything in hopes to gain more. I'd rather be more on the conservative side, but take some risks. But I just like taking calculated risks.
That's one of the tricks to the side hustle, you know, conundrum is that the two opposite but equally risky options are: one, you never commit and you never give in to the side hustle and you may miss out on the opportunity. The other is you bet the farm, right?
Yeah.
Quit your job, leverage your house, you know.
Yep.
And really you're not, you didn't, I think one of the biggest mistakes is you didn't take the time to develop, to know, to recognize, and you weren't self-aware enough to realize that you don't have the talent that you're hoping you have.
All right. Yeah.
You know, and that can be really tricky. You know, well, part of the reason why I was never entrepreneurial was because of that fear that I'd become one of those people. You know, you've met them, the snake oil salesman, the person who just, you know, they're just no one, you never want to be around them. You can see them very apparently on social media now, you know, because they can't help themselves.
Yeah.
You know, these are the typical, you know, the prototype is the person who either has some invention, you know, that they're convinced is going to make $1 billion, or they get, you know, the people that get sucked into like multi-level marketing and stuff like that, where if they just put that kind of effort into a real job, you know, they would be quite successful. But that type of person always made me never consider, you know, the business route, this doing your own thing route. But what I did is I just followed that innate thing, you know, all the way through life. Just follow the innate path. And also I've come to the recognition here recently, like I don't have a lot of discipline. Like I'm not a very disciplined individual. I'm just good at following what it is comes naturally. When I try to discipline, it usually goes awry.
See, and I look on the outside thinking, man, Matt's disciplined. No matter.
No, that's just natural.
If we go to CES or CEDIA, he's like at 4 a.m. He's hitting the gym, the CrossFit, and I'm, you know, in the bed sleeping, catching an extra hour. To me, I'm looking at that going, you are disciplined. You don't see that, but I see that. But maybe it's just a different view of what discipline is.
Yeah. Part of my internal struggle is that, you know, the discipline required to get to the perfect outcome or the perfectionist outcome, it means that I'm always falling short, you know, of whatever it is I intended to do. Okay. So even though I did get up at 4 a.m. and go to the gym and work out, you know, I might miss a day and then it's all for nothing. It's all for naught. The following the natural path. Then there's a few things in life I can't follow the natural path, and this is where I struggle so much. You know, eating, you know, diet, and exercise, and you know, that kind of stuff. I'm just not good at being very disciplined. It doesn't come naturally to me. Okay, and so I'm constantly fighting and attempting discipline.
I think that,
and I've always fallen short.
We all can relate to that. I mean, goodness. You know, we want the things that we want to do, we don't do. The things we don't want to do, we end up doing anyway.
But almost all of Obsessed Garage, all this struggle, all the climbing through the razor wire, taking the crossroad, never looking back, continuing to move forward, I get zero credit for any of that. It was just natural. I didn't have a choice. It just happen. I should get no credit for, getting good grades in high school, no credit for getting into Villanova, no credit for learning to sell. Those things were just all just happening. And I don't know if it's divine intervention here or what, but it just kind of just happened. Obsessed Garage, wealth management just happened. So I didn't take like some big risk, or I didn't have some major discipline. Like, I'm going to write a business plan, I'm going to build this business, I'm going to grind it out. It was just, I have no idea what's in front of me. I'm chasing the future, and whatever that future is, and it's just whatever's natural is natural.
So then somebody looking on from the outside looking in, you know what they're going to say?
You're very disciplined.
No, they're going to say you're lucky.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't think it's luck. I really don't. And now where you're going is, okay, do you have some innate abilities that have allowed you to be that driven, that passionate?
Are you getting in the way of your innate abilities? Are you unaware of your innate abilities? Are you overestimating your innate abilities?
Do you think a lot of business owners overestimate what they're capable of doing, and that's what gets them into trouble, maybe?
Probably. I think that a lot of failed businesses probably happen because people get past their innate. They're not disciplined, and then if you don't have either, you get beyond your means there, and you don't have the discipline to be. The things I do have discipline on is being coached. I don't like being coached, but I just do it anyway.
Right. Because you've seen the results, though.
Right. I don't have innate discipline or the innate desire to wash a car. But
that's interesting.
But I'm driven by the results.
Gotcha.
I want to feel that shiny, soft, beautiful paint at the end. I want to feel that. And so I really can't give myself credit for washing the car and doing the work, because that's not really discipline. It was the blind, pursuit. And so the question is, do I outkick my coverage here at some point because I'm not disciplined? This is what my coach has been. This is where the coaching can help fill those gaps.
Right.
Hey, Matt, your head is not in the numbers. You're going to have a problem.
Right.
So get into the numbers. On Tuesday, I found a $39,000, 2 fittings. We have $39,000 invested in it. We can't sell it.
Oh, wow.
We can, but not very easily. So I need to come up with a strategy to sell them.
Okay.
It's a certain size fitting that only fits on certain size pressure washers.
Right.
The problem is those fittings are $50 a piece. They only fit on pressure washers that cost $100. I had them made because at the time, 50% of the pressure washers that were, at the time I designed it, 50% of the pressure washers that were being built had this fitting.
Right.
Now almost none of them do.
Oh, interesting.
And so in order for me to get that fitting made, I had to commit to buy, 500 of each.
Sure.
And so now, and they're 500 each, and they cost, $20 to $30 a piece. So it's $39,000 of these 2,000 fittings.
Right.
That I can't really sell.
Okay.
I certainly can't sell for $50 a piece. And so I'm going to have to try to sell it for maybe 50% less than what I have, but at least get that inventory out from underneath me.
Right.
That required discipline for me to actually get my head in the numbers.
Right.
That was one of like 6 things we found on the first 2 products.
Okay.
I have $84,000 of the original Mosmatic gun.
Right.
An inventory sitting in on pallets. What had happened was we used to sell like 200 or 300 of those a month, and when we came out with the OG spec one, we had a blanket order, so stuff's still coming in the back door.
Right.
And we're only selling maybe 10% of what we were selling before, and so we started to build up and build up and build up and build up. Now I got those 2 things is $125,000 sitting there.
Right.
That I've either got to try to figure out how to get out from underneath, but my head wasn't in the numbers.
Right.
And if the longer I wait, there's going to be that number is going to turn from 120,000 to 1.2 million, and then maybe 12 million, and then bust.
And so that's some of the challenges that go from the side hustle to the empire, is that now you've got to figure out that balance.
Well, following the innate to eventually I outkick my coverage, right?
Yep.
and the guy's running back, the IRS is running to the end zone with my future, and so this is the struggle of the side hustle, the struggle of the following what you're good at.
Okay. Let's go down that even a little bit more about some of the challenges. So maybe what was the biggest challenge in the early days of balancing OG with like your full-time job?
Yeah, I mean, that was extremely difficult. I had decided again, I'm building the bridge, right? I got to have a website. That was what I thought. Obsessed Wealth Management, Obsessed Garage, and we'd have this and I got an approval to put links between the two so they could link back and forth to one another. And when I was hoping I'd drive everybody to obsessedgarage.com, and then they would see, this wealth management thing, and then they would start to inquire and say, oh, man, this guy's pretty sharp. Maybe I should call him about my money too. So I didn't even care about the selling the pressure washers because I didn't understand scale at that point.
Right, yeah.
What I was trying to sell them was not scalable at all. You can only have so many clients.
Correct.
So I was trying to figure out how could I scale that. And so the struggle was I had 200 clients, and then I'm going to try to add 200 more. How am I going to do that? And then the struggle became I had two struggles: family. You're sharing too much, you're showing off too much. That was one.
This is our house. This is our life.
And then the job compliance,
Right,
and the SEC and FINRA saying you can't do this.
Right.
And so I'm stepping over the line, and I can kind of see it. I could feel that I was onto something, but I couldn't get these things off my back. Right. So this is the razor wire. This is the the landmines getting into, and then even the audience, even the people watching, saying, "What are you doing? You don't know what you're talking about. You don't belong here." And then the vendors saying no. Everybody's saying no, and so I'm getting all this opposition, and so that was extremely taxing. And then of course when I got fired, and I'm like, holy crap, what am I going to do? Because I hadn't fully committed to this path,
right,
to the innate path. I was still following I was trying to be disciplined. So in wealth management was discipline,
right,
but it was not natural discipline. So I was able to only do a fraction. So if you find yourself in life, I think this is what I'm talking about here. If you find yourself in life where you're good at something, you're not great,
right?
So it's not innate, it's not natural, but you're good enough, and you're disciplined enough. But you couldn't put in a 16-hour day and do a good job at it if you tried. But if you find and you get on the path where those two parallel roads are really the one path, and you can put in a 16-hour day, and it felt like euphoria.
Right,
it felt right. It felt natural. Like, I don't want to turn this off. So wealth management, I always wanted to turn it off as soon as possible. So I was never able to go as deep or as far as I wanted to, despite the fact I wanted that perfect discipline.
Right.
And I was certainly disciplined enough because the rewards were good enough that if I put in the work, the result was going to be really great. One of the sayings of wealth management is you work harder than anybody else will work for 10 years, and then you'll live like nobody else gets to live for the rest of your life.
Sure, yeah.
So you put in the work, you put in the discipline, and I followed that path.
Right.
But I didn't have nearly as much discipline to get the result I was hoping to get. I just didn't have it. I didn't have enough of it because it wasn't natural enough. And so the important thing was that I eventually, in my late 30s, figured out, early 30s, and then mid 30s into late 30s, figured out, oh shoot, this is how I can innately use what my skill set is,
right,
and then have a natural tendency to a result. And so I don't really have to have discipline anymore because discipline is really, really hard.
Yeah. Do you think people are scared to go a different direction? Let's say they're in this path, but like you said, when Friday comes, they are happy to turn work off because they're not excited about work. They're just doing it because it's paying the bills. And there's some comfortability in that because it's the known.
Well, there's a lot of discipline to show up on time, leave, show up every day.
100%.
Don't dodge your responsibilities, do your job. But you can never really do that job to your full potential if it's not natural. Yeah. I believe like Lance Armstrong would not be good. Like he's not disciplined. He's just following natural.
Yeah.
I'm going to get on that bike and pedal.
Yeah.
Maybe he hates pedaling the bike, but he's addicted to the result, right?
Yeah.
And so I would argue the outliers in the world, the reason why they're outliers is because they found two things. They found what their innate path is, and then the discipline sort of just happens naturally. So it's like this natural pursuit, natural discipline.
Gotcha.
So if you're doing a job, and this is where a side hustling, finding a different job can come in. If you don't know who you are, try to figure that out so that way you can figure out where you could put the effort in.
Yeah.
And then you're not talking work-life balance and all these crutches, all this nonsense. You're talking about how can I have just balance, meaning my brain is balanced and moving toward whatever feels natural and feels good to me. The struggle is we have many things, drugs, food. We have many things that feel good that can lead you astray.
Yeah, for sure.
And so this is the tricky part. Otherwise, everyone would just be able to figure it out. If everybody could figure out what they're really good at and what they're innately good at doing, and then having the natural discipline attached to that, then the world would be amazing.
And win.
Right. But I think that the most successful outliers of the world are the people that have just either they got lucky. That's where the luck comes in.
Yeah.
So the luck for me is that I was able to get on that parallel path.
Okay.
I took crossroad. The last crossroad was the parallel path. And then eventually the parallel path becomes a single path when you figure that out. That's the fruit.
Yeah. So
what was your original question? I don't even remember what it was.
That one was the biggest challenge in the early days, balancing OG and your full-time job.
It was I didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
I didn't know what my talent was, and I didn't reach enough crossroads to figure that out. Some people are fortunate they figure that out when they're a kid.
Sure, yeah.
I'm a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm just like I love reading the journals and like I love the helping people, whatever the thing that you're addicted to.
Right.
Versus there are some people that are just so disciplined because they wanted to win, but I would argue they probably weren't as useful or successful had they taken the path that was innate.
Yeah.
I'd say probably a good percentage of doctors probably just did it out of the discipline,
Or maybe they looked at it financially. I know I can make this amount of money that could support this kind of lifestyle. Therefore, whether I'm passionate or not, I know I could do that and be successful.
But I would wager the very best doctors it was their destiny.
Yeah. Yeah. Regardless of where they're working, they're going to do amazing.
They can't turn it off. They have to physically, shut off Obsessed Garage.
Yeah.
Because Obsessed Garage is me.
Yeah.
It's not a side hustle. It's not a business. It's not something. It's just me.
Yeah. I was at a conference many, many years ago, and the guy that was speaking, he said, "What keeps you up at night? What consumes your thoughts?" And I began to look at where I was at in life, and it was no longer, it used to be that, but it no longer was. And so I began to think, like, what do I think about constantly? And it was electronics, it was theater, it was speakers, it was all this stuff. And then I began to realize, like, okay, what does that even mean? I had to start, like you said, I had to discover, like, where am I headed? Is there a path here that I've not taken because I didn't really think that was even a viable path? And so mine was kind of accident too. I began to think, okay, well, I love this stuff and I want to share my love for it. And I want to teach people. I have a heart of an educator. I really like teaching and showing people. I like taking complex things and making it simple. A lot of times when I'll share something on a how-to on my channel, I don't care who's watching the video. I want them to be able to watch it and go, I get it. I understand it. It may not be as deep as somebody else that has a really, really huge understanding of the subject. It may not be as deep for them, but I want to make sure that everybody that watches this can follow along and do it. But I know that that's like who I am. I like teaching. And so when I began to figure that I could do this through video and be able to share this through a podcast, and it began to just change my trajectory. And so that was a big fork in the road for me. Mm-hmm. You know, I was a youth pastor for 23 years, and like I no longer thought about lock-ins, hanging out with teenagers all night long, and going to summer camp and riding the bus ride for 21 hours. That was no longer my passion and what got me excited. And I had to figure out, all right, what really, somebody said, like in the country, in the South, they say, what cranked your tractor? I've never used that phrase, but like just what gets you excited. And I think so many people, that's their hobby, is what gets them excited, and they do the job that pays the bills.
And they treat their hobby like a hobby rather than treating the hobby like an obsession, right?
And if they treated the hobby like an obsession, it might actually become the job. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you and I have experienced in our life, is that we began to pursue what we're good at. We began to pursue what we love and are most passionate about and obsessed about. And then that ends up becoming the job. It becomes the income, because we're operating in our giftedness, we're operating in our skill set, and we're discovering ourselves more and more along the way.
And I think probably most people have somewhere in the order of 50 to 5,000 different paths that could work for, you know? And I think that the destined business owner or destined entrepreneur only has 10. Mm-hmm. It's a lot harder to find, but because of the lack of interest in multiple areas, mm-hmm. because of the lack of well-roundedness, you're conditioned to be that person. Mm-hmm. And that's why not everybody is conditioned.
Sure.
So, you know, the struggle would be if somebody's listening to this, unlikely if they're listening to this, because they're probably in that, you know, in that category of the, you know, closer to 50. But if you have just infinite interest and you just bounce around all over the place, this advice could be real damaging for you, because you'd always just jump from one ship to the next. You never get anywhere. Right. And so that's where the discipline comes in, figuring out who the heck you are and what you're wired and where you're best benefited, what path or what crossroads you're best taking. Because every path I had was a V, not like not 72 different options. You know,
that's confusing.
I only had, you know, this A or B, A or B, A or B, and only 3 or 4 times. Mm-hmm. You know, whereas I think, you know, different personalities may have, you know, an infinite loop of choices at all times, and those crossroads come up on them fast.
Right. Sure. So when you think about OG and its infancy, and then going from, you know, running from just your passion and your interest, and then that becomes a legitimate business, like what was the turning point for you when you just said, you know what, I'm ready to just go all in on this? Because at some point when you're doing this side hustle thing here, you're managing your day job over here, at some point you have to figure out, and I know content creators, they're doing that. You know, I did that. I had a full-time job as a youth pastor. I had a part-time home business building websites for clients. And then I had this YouTube thing over here. And at some point you got to figure out, okay, when is it time to go all in and make that transition? So what did that look like for Matt Moorman?
When I got called to the headquarters of Raymond James, you know, I left Merrill Lynch, went to Raymond James, and I started Obsessed Wealth Management. I thought that was my path. You know, I need to create the bridge. It was at that point I realized, when I got called down by regulatory attorneys and regional and national sales managers, and we're all sitting in a room, and they're, you know, scrutinizing everything I'd ever done or said on YouTube, you know, scrutinized every email I'd ever sent. Yeah. I didn't do anything wrong, but they weren't sure. You know, I wasn't doing it like I was stepping over the line. Right. I was skating the line. And so after I left that meeting, I'm like, oh shoot, this could go either way. They sent me without a resolution. This was in March of 2018.
Okay.
I was selling the year before. I'd sold $1.8 million in stuff. I was on track to sell, a couple $1 million of stuff or more, that year in 2018, which was the second year that I was shipping stuff on the Obsessed Garage site, or selling it on Obsessed Garage site and shipping out of my parents' house. And my parents and I had come up with a plan for them to move down. Their house was for sale, and I think they were under contract around that time. And so now I'm in hot water, and they're not sure what they're going to do with me. And so I was forced to, I just remember getting a yellow pad out, and I drew 2 columns, on the left side. So I drew 2 lines and had 3 columns. The left side was wealth management only.
Okay.
On the middle was wealth management plus Obsessed Garage. Sure. And the third was just Obsessed Garage. Right. And then I just kind of, conservatively projected what did I think I could do with each of them. Right. And I knew that they weren't going to allow me to do Obsessed Garage in the way that I wanted to do it, because I thought Obsessed Garage was just a feeder for Obsessed
like a funnel,
Wealth.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
So it was a prospecting tool. And so I knew that they weren't really going to let me do that. I was going to have to totally, build a wall in between it. Yeah. And I knew that was going to be really a real disadvantage. I also knew with 100% that I was not going to do just wealth management. Okay. So I was considering, am I willing to put this wall up and have 2 lives? The wealth management life and the Obsessed Garage life. Right. And never 2 should they meet. Right. That's what they were going to require of me. Versus, and so because that was now the case, my, the numbers of the result wasn't going to be what I thought it was going to be. I honestly believe that would have become one of the biggest financial advisors in the world or in the country. Yeah. I'd have probably been managing $1 billion, within 10 years and or more. And I, because I would have been, I'm talking to some very affluent and people who would trust me because they get to see who I really was. Right. Well, if I wasn't going to be able to show who I really was, then how was I ever going to get them? I was going to have to go back to wine tastings and golf lessons and, drink, and I don't play golf.
And go back to your passion. That's not what excites you.
And I'm not going to be very good at it because that requires a lot of discipline to do that. And I disciplined enough, but I was going to have to be extremely disciplined. And that was also going to cut into my ability to be able to build Obsessed Garage. And so I just wrote down the numbers, and then I had actually I found somebody to buy my wealth management practice. I knew I was in hot water. I'm like, well, let me just make this easy on you. I'm going to sell my practice. I was selling it for like $1 million. I was going to sell it and then pay back, the firm what I'd owed in my contract. Right. And it would basically mean I would have been a wash. I got to keep the money that I'd gotten in my contract for going from one firm to the next, and I would be able to, sell my practice to another advisor. The problem is that transition would have taken a couple of years. I would have had to slowly introduce everybody to these other guys. I would have had to, make sure that everybody stayed and transitioned to them. So in other words, that would have taken me months and months and months to do it. And then they said, no, you can't sell it. And that's when I probably should have hired an attorney right then and there. I said, what do you mean I can't sell it? He said, no, you can't do that, because they knew they were going to fire me. Right. And so then I'd sold the practice because I chose column 3. I chose just Obsessed Garage. Right. And I'd figured out an exit plan. And then I got the hammer dropped. And so then that made the decision for me.
Right. Made it easy. You're like, fine, I'll just go all in.
Very, very hard, because I'm getting cut and landmined and blown up and, beaten and bruised and battered and character called in the judge. So it wasn't like exciting, hindsight being what it is. I should have been smiling ear to ear. But that was the inflection point that made it happen for me. I don't know what I would be doing today had that not happened.
Sure. And I think a lot of times in life, we see these tragedies, we see these events that are out of our control like that, and they're devastating. They're horrendously devastating. But I always look at things like that. You either allow it to make you become bitter, or you allow it to make you become better. You either take what you've been given, figure it out, move forward in spite of those difficulties and those circumstances, or you sit in your bed with your Cheetos and you wallow in your sorrow and you don't do anything with it.
talk to a lot of young men, and one of the things I tell them often is that you in their career is you can never go negative. So in that whole process of wealth management, I never went negative.
Okay.
When I was pushing carts at Walmart, I never went negative. Now, there were negative events that happened to me, which would cause me to get anger and not want to be there.
Right.
But I would still stay positive. I'm going to do the best cart pushing job I can possibly do.
Sure.
Until one day there was an inflection point. I'm like, I have to leave this, right? And so you never go. I got accused of stealing in home theater when I was at Sound Advice, and I knew that I wasn't going to stay there because of that.
Right.
But I went and became the number one salesperson. I never went negative.
Yeah.
And so you as an employee, as a person who's operating in your career, never head down that negative path.
Yeah.
Just don't go there. Don't go to the, well, I built this for, the owner. I built this for him. It's all me.
Right.
I'm not going to do anything anymore. If you go there, it's over. Just quit. Just quit right then and there. So if you head down that path, you can have those thoughts, but you can't actually act on it, or you start to go negative and you shut down.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that, just walk in, hand your letter of resignation. If you're smart, go find the next job where you won't go negative.
Right.
But if you're one of those people that has a tendency, and we have some here that happen over the years where they went negative.
Sure.
And once you go there, it's hard to get out
Hard to
of
recover. Yeah.
If you start to have that path, if you had like 2 steps into the into the lake, just leave, just walk out. It'll be better for everybody.
Yeah, better for you and better for
But in my life, I've never gone there. It's never happened, and that's why I've had success. Always stay positive. I know my face, and the way that my inflection, my tone sounds negative, but I'm extremely always stay positive. I'm always going to win. I'm always going to support. I'm always going to do whatever's necessary to do the best job that I can do.
Yeah.
Never go negative.
I love that. That's good advice. Never go negative. That's deep, man.
If you head down that path, and you're doomed.
Sure.
Oh man, this guy would be nowhere. For this lady that I've been working for, she'd be nothing without me.
Yeah.
Let me show you, man. If I leave here, then the thing you're going to be shocked is if you leave, things are actually going to improve, because once you've gone there, it's over.
Yeah, for sure.
Just stop this. Stop the emotional roller coaster when you're in your career, and stay positive.
Yeah, I love it.
You have to deal with adversity and stress and stuff like that, but you don't go negative on it.
So you're building Obsessed Garage. It's beginning to gain traction. You're doing really well in there. Why do you think OG resonated with so many people? What is it about it? Is it the products? Is it you, the face behind the business? Is it your process?
I think it's all of that, not to cop out on your question, but it's become a brand. It's an aggregation of humans that think a certain way, that are pursuing excellence.
Yeah.
Pursuing excellent doesn't mean you're always excellent.
Right.
It's you're in pursuit of it. And if you're at least in pursuit of it, just back to my previous comment, if you go negative,
Right.
If you say, I'm just going to accept mediocrity, you're going to have a lot of things that are mediocre.
Right, sure.
Most things are going to be mediocre, but as long as you're pursuing excellent,
Got it.
you're on the positive path. And so I think that's the thing that resonates most. That's the brand, the pursuit of functional excellence.
Yeah.
Obsessed garage.
Sure.
I'm not just in my garage, I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah.
And I think that resonates with a lot of people. And so the core community are people that are like that. But the business is the next layer circle. My friend Matt Rutledge explained this to me the other day, that is the next concentric circle where those are the people that aspire to be obsessed.
Right.
They
fringes.
appreciate obsession.
I got it.
And so those are the ones that are buying it. They're the ones that are purchasing it.
Sure.
And then it expands outward from there. That core group of people are the ones that are influencing all these additional concentric circles. And so the core mission or the core message of Obsessed Garage is, the pursuit of functional excellence. And the value proposition is that I'm going to chase, that excellent life. I'm going to share that life with people, and those that appreciate either whether they admire it or they are it.
Right.
So it's confirmation for them. It explains a certain way of being that's rather unique.
So the people on that next circle outside of, let's just call it the core, the obsessed.
They got a bunch of crap on their counter, right? But they one of the two of their drawers are hyper organized, and they want to be there.
Right. So do you help them get there? Do you encourage them to get there, or is that just something they're on their own?
I think it's a spectrum where some have a chance to get there, and most will never get there.
Most will stay in those circles.
They'll buy everything I have, and then it's in boxes on their front porch. They want it.
I got you.
And by the way, those are the best customers.
Yeah, true.
And so those are the aspirational, the aspirationally obsessed. I think are the best customers.
Yeah.
The actually obsessed can be, sometimes can be a nightmare if they're not nice.
Sure.
If their natural tendency is to be negative,
right? Sure.
It can be a problematic when you just can't let it go. Everybody's always taking advantage of you. Everybody's always screwing you.
Right.
I try to turn those people off as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because they're not the people you want to be in relationship with, because they just bring you down.
Do you think you need customers in each one of those categories? Is it beneficial to have, the core and then on the fringe of the core, but then even way out here where people are just curious, and so they'll buy a product? Does that help them to move?
Well, that's the business.
Towards?
The business goal is to be able to capture the curious, which is the largest subset of people.
Yeah,
right?
so that would be way out here. Yeah.
Right, and that takes time, and that takes this is why hopefully you have like 5 million followers. Though you have a large marketing funnel. Right, where you have a large grouping of people. The simple law of large numbers, and so that's the goal. That's the hope. That's what I'm hoping to accomplish with the wholesaling of products and the becoming the product representation and capturing the curious.
Right.
And then if you really hit it, you capture the don't even care but need it. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So like everybody needs glass cleaner, so you sell $50 million or 50 million bottles of glass cleaner.
Yeah.
And so you just you build a household name, a brand, that becomes household recognized.
Sure.
That it's so rare and it's so far beyond the realm of something I even hope to create. But who knows? If I keep following this innate path, I don't outkick my coverage.
Right.
I continue to go back to being coached and fill in the gaps. Get your head out of your butt on whatever it is.
Right.
Maybe it can happen. Who knows?
Yeah.
And I think the only way that something like that happens is the right relationship show up in your life.
Sure.
And you're open to that crossroad of the relationships you're including.
Yeah.
The biggest epiphany is that having found out that the people have just put themselves in my orbit in order to provide me some value, which would be an equal exchange. They bring their value to provide me value. I can provide them value, and that's our relationship, right? And then you can leverage that.
Sure. The networking, finding people of like-mindedness, have the same drive, same passion. It honestly, it's rare. That's the hard part, is finding the right people, whether you're building an organization or a business, finding the right people to come along to be part of the team that aren't going to be the whiners and the complainers and the non-doers, but they're going to get behind and they're going to give their very best and they're going to go all in with you to build this thing, pursuing their passion and their dreams and pursuing, utilizing their gifts and talents and abilities. That's tough to find those people, but I think those people are worth searching for.
That's another word that I think gets you heading around the wrong path would be networking, instead of like natural relationship developing.
Yeah.
Because then you can get into the, everybody thinks about the, the real estate agent that shows up at the Chamber of Commerce and just trying to sell everybody something.
Yeah.
He's trying to, he is networking.
I gotcha. That
instead
makes sense.
of I would never join the Chamber of Commerce or never join these groups.
Some new connections. Yeah.
I would only do that if I if I loved it, if it was something I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so that's one of the things. One of the discoveries is when I went to the Porsche Car Club of America. I'm like, this is exciting. I got the Porsche. I'm going to go. But almost everybody there was to be part of the Porsche Club, not just be them with the other group of like-minded people.
Yeah.
So they were networking, so I'm like, I hate this. This is terrible.
Interesting. Yeah.
Business,
Right,
networking,
yeah.
these are semantics,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
course,
sure.
but it's a mindset.
But
and
it's
how
a
you
different
think
way
about
of
it.
looking at it. Yeah.
Go with I found that most areas I was going awry in life, business, whatever, they were always because, let me see, how do I think about this? They were always because I was either forcing it or, again, leading with the result.
Right.
And so you go into or you're doing something that just isn't natural. And so you go into network, and we started to do this in wealth management.
Right,
I
yeah.
got to network. This is
Sure.
how I'm going to get
Right.
clients.
Yep.
So
Get to know people.
in order to be a proper networker, you have to be very disciplined.
Right.
But if you don't like networking,
Yeah.
it's really hard to be disciplined.
Sure.
And so, people in general, you're doing something that you don't have a lot of discipline, and you're doing something you hate, and you've gone negative, and we head down this terrible path. And so with Obsessed Garage, the value prop has been, I freaking love this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell it to you straight.
Right. Yeah.
And then I'm going to, by proxy, people are going to end up following along and then grouping up and creating a community on their own,
Instead of trying to make it happen. Interesting.
As if two people saw an Obsessed Garage shirt. They don't know each other.
Right.
They instantaneously know
Yeah.
that I've got something in common with
That's
this
correct.
person.
Yep. Makes that conversation.
One may have $25 million in the bank and the other has negative $25,000.
Yeah.
But
It
they
doesn't matter.
both
Yep.
get it. The one just hasn't made it yet.
Right. He's on his path. He's on his journey, or hers.
Very few hers, but
Well,
there's a couple.
but there's
of
few.
them.
But
There's a
I want to
couple of
include
them.
them.
There's a couple of them. Yeah.
So what has been the most rewarding part of building Obsessed Garage for you?
It's been the personal understanding and growth, personally, and understanding the world, more. Learning to become a leader because I was forced to.
Right.
I'm still questioning. I've just questioned this to the coaches the other day. I'm still not sure that the path that I'm on in leadership is innate.
Okay.
Like, am I actually a leader? Or am I just being disciplined to becoming a leader? And if I'm not naturally a leader, I'm never going to become as good of a leader as if, and is there a crossroads that's coming up here?
Okay.
Am I going to figure that out?
So we've talked a lot about your gut over the years. Your gut a lot of times leads you to make those decisions. What's your gut telling you on that? Do you think you're a leader?
I think so. I think that I am a extremely unique person, right?
You are.
Right?
Yeah, I can see
I
that.
understand
Yeah,
that. No,
yeah.
no arrogance, no superiority.
Yep.
I just understand that I have never
who I
met
am.
anybody like me,
Yeah.
right? And it's deeply, deeply troubled, right? Right. And so I don't view that. So it's taken me, 45 years in this world to not recognize that as positive or negative. Just that's what's
just who
so.
I am. Right.
It's just the reality. And so then the reality is that uniqueness, is that oddity, positive or negative? And there's certainly some of both.
Right.
Is there an over or underweight in one or the other? And then because of that uniqueness, I think that it does have the potential to have leadership, potential for like extremely high quality leadership,
Okay.
potential.
Yeah.
But because I don't have like innate, relationship development skills, this is where I question, am I well suited to
Right.
be a leader, or am I better suited to carve out and be just the sort of the creative and or the subject matter,
Right.
the,
Sure.
the specific thing.
Yeah.
You know, because oftentimes the creative or the person that's really skilled in something is not best being the leader of it. They're best being the practitioner.
Correct. Yeah.
So I'm still uncertain if I'm a practitioner
Okay.
or if I'm an actual leader.
I love the fact that you're even willing to question that. I think a lot of business owners, they think their business is successful because of them and what they have done, and they have to remain at the helm. They have to remain the one making all the decisions. And you're actually beginning to wonder, maybe that doesn't necessarily need to be me. Maybe it does, but maybe it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of your self-discovery, as you've been talking about even earlier, figuring out who you are. What is Matt Moorman's giftedness? What is your passion? And if it's not to be the leader of Obsessed Garage or Obsessed whatever, you know, the overall arching Obsessed for all of these brands that you've established, what does that look like? And so I think it's pretty interesting that at least you're not so like heels dug in that it's me, you know? And I think that takes a long time for somebody to get to that point in leadership. And maybe a part of being a good leader is knowing when you're not the one that needs to be the leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite movies of all time is The Intern, you know, with Anne Hathaway and what's his face? It's not Al Pacino, the other guy.
I don't remember his name.
Yeah, the old guy, the crazy Democrat guy now. Like the most famous actor of all time. No, it don't come to me, but you know, The Intern. She builds this company. It like happens out of nowhere, and she's like, Anne Hathaway's trying to decide if she, you know, should hire a CEO or she should be it.
Right. Yeah.
And so she goes on this journey and actually hires someone, and then recognizes that you know she's the leader. You know, she's the person.
Sure.
And then going on that, you know, that roller coaster of discovery and figuring that out. So I think that you know you'll in life if you follow the crossroads and you don't get hung up by the barricades that are at the crossroad, and you're willing to like kind of crawl through it and then look at both sides and then figure out which path makes sense. Yeah. You don't overanalyze it, you just go. So when I'm at the crossroad and I get through the barricades and the razor wire, I just pick. I'm analyzing at warp speed, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, right.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh no, let me go back left. Oh no, let me go back right. Let me go back left. You know, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. And the more I think you can choose quickly and follow that innate path, follow your gut. I'll figure this out. You know, am I destined to be the CEO of this large organization? Yeah. Am I better served being the sort of the emeritus, like the chairman of the board,
right? Yeah,
and have a leader lead it,
right?
Am I just the vision, or am I the executor? And I think that where I get in trouble with the world is that there's a lot of I's and me's in there. Yeah. But I think if you can't figure yourself out, how are you supposed to figure out other people?
Yeah, true.
You know, so there's a lot of selfishness in there. But that's if you're selfish about figuring that out, then you can be much more benefit and much more selfless.
Right. Sure.
And so I think of Obsessed Garage as extremely, even though the thesis is very selfish. If this works for me, then others probably will want it too.
Sure.
But the selflessness is putting it out there, because it'd be very selfish for me to keep that all to myself.
I found it, I keep it, this is awesome, and it's all about me.
Right. So instead, the selflessness is then including others and sort of giving up. And I've had to give up a lot of things that I don't mind doing and actually rather enjoy doing, and hire somebody to do it. Right. And that's where the business is an excuse to be in a relationship comes in, you know. And now you have a business, right? When you're able to act very selfishly in executing on whatever it is you're innately designed to do, and then it's very selfless to include others in that. That was the biggest epiphany in my life, is I just started inviting people to do stuff. Invite. Because I had, prior to that seminal event in 2014 when I went crazy, it was, if I invite you, then I owe you something.
Right. Yeah.
Instead of the payment is the invitation.
Right.
Right. And that took me a long time to discover that. I'm like, wow, just that the affirmation of inviting somebody to do something else with you.
Right.
I'm talking to a brand that I admired for so long, Detailed Image. I'm calling them and inviting them to sell some of my products with me together.
Right.
I'm inviting them to have them sell me some of their products. There's affirmation in that. Instead of us being competitors,
Right, sure.
If there's no such thing as competition, I make that call without all the baggage that I made up,
Right.
and I invited them to do something with me. That's when the world can change.
I like it. That's super cool. Well, I got one more question for you. So maybe what is the one thing that people don't realize about what it takes to build a brand like Obsessed Garage?
I mean, the risk part is the risk of being wrong, the risk of being ostracized.
Okay.
I mean, the risk of reputation. The oftentimes you put out a product like I'm still not certain like these press-all bottles are going to work.
You're still chasing it. Yeah.
I mean, and it may not, and that's a reputational risk.
Sure.
That's a risk of all the effort and all the work put into convince people that, hey, I know what I'm doing here.
Right.
I think that's the part that gets underestimated. And when you're trying to build a reputation and build a brand,
Right.
you've got to take risks in order to take a next level up. And so pretty much every product or everything that I've suggested somebody do, there's potential, and there are people that are violated. Like get a Krenza pressure washer and it doesn't work.
Right.
So that person's off the list.
Take it off,
reputation destroyed. Well, it's not in my control, but it's it's part of the numbers of this, right? And so you have to take a lot of risks. Monetarily, you have to take a lot of risks with the the reputation is the biggest part of the brand building, right? And so that's the but if you intend to eradicate all that risk, you never get anywhere, and you're just hanging out in your basement, by yourself, with nobody around.
Yeah.
And you're a clerk at the court, and you're just working to get that 25-year pension, and you're miserable, because you missed out on the potential that the risk scared you away from taking. And so that's the conundrum. And the risk doesn't have to be start a business. The risk could be put yourself out there for the job that you think you might want.
Sure. Fill out the resume.
I just had somebody send me this. I don't even know what he wants. But somebody just overnighted FedEx. It's a folder, a Staples folder. On the left side is a letter, cover letter. On the right, I haven't even read it yet.
Okay.
On the right side is, I think, his resume.
Okay. Nice.
And he's putting himself out there.
Right.
Probably not even gonna. I don't even know what he wants, know. But probably not going to choose him. But you've got to, that was creative. And then the next thing would be to just show up here,
Sure.
Yeah. And take a risk of your reputation, or risk of you might get kicked out the door.
Right.
You might get arrested, And so then you want to try to hedge risks and be intelligent and study the risk in order to, come up with the best result possible.
Right.
But you're not leading with the result. You're leading with the value, providing value. So I always led with provide value with Obsessed Garage, provide value by providing information.
Yeah.
I've been struggling with this on the YouTube channel. I'm like, man, we don't get big views. Maybe we should go and chase the views. I'd have more people.
Yeah.
I think that's leading with the result.
Yeah.
Instead of what I need to do is just set my camera up and take apart my GT3 and just be authentic.
Just be you. But I think that's what's think about the ones that just chase the views. I know plenty of people that have great views, but they don't have a business. They have great following, but they don't have, they don't have an empire, So views is a vanity. I'm learning in the whole YouTube space or Instagram or whatever platform you like, that number is a vanity metric. Yes, if you share your life and nobody watches, then really the video is irrelevant, because it doesn't matter how good the video is. So we want people to watch, But if that's all you're chasing, then that's where it ends up becoming, it's just a false metric.
I think engagement doesn't necessarily mean impact. Just because you have a lot of engagement doesn't mean you're impactful.
Right.
And I think impact is much more valuable than engagement.
Yeah.
But without engagement, you get no impact.
Exactly. So there is a balance there.
And so what if you had an insane amount of engagement?
Right.
Then you could have more potential impact. With more, with your impact could potentially be greater. And that's what I'm always thinking about. Right. Is there a way for me to adjust authenticity, have maybe more appropriate authenticity? But the key word there is authenticity.
Sure.
Have more appropriate authenticity, which would improve engagement, which would allow for the increase in impact.
Okay.
But with every uptick in engagement, I think there's a potential negatively correlated loss in impact. And that's the conundrum. Sure. That's the, can I engage people that are curious?
Right, yeah. Well, one thing that we were talking about earlier is that making an impact on people, and I personally am just loving the podcast because I can see so many people. This is free information. Like, this is you sharing, this is what I've done that has led me to where I'm at now. And to me, that's super motivational. Somebody on the other end can watch this and either go, must be nice, which we hear that. They could look at it and go, I'll never get there. But man, if there's a few people that get some of this nuggets of wisdom from what you've experienced over the past 10, 20, 30 years that you've been in business, and then now seeing how you're building out Obsessed Garage over the past 9 years or so, taking that and doing something with it, looking at their life going, am I really down the path that I need to be? And I think some people are scared to even make a change because of their age. They're like, man, I'm in my 40s. I'm kind of stuck here. No, you're not. I completely changed. I'm almost 50 and I completely did a career change 7 years ago.
Especially if you side hustle.
Yeah.
And you don't do that where I explain where you
Correct.
bet the farm on
I don't
something. You don't even
No.
know that you have the talent for it, right? Had I just quit, bet the farm, I would have never had the opportunity to get. I mean, I think about this often. I'm like, man, when I should have started my own home theater business, back in the early 2000s, I would have freaking killed it. Yeah. But maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't have the life experience to be able to make that successful. And maybe it would have set me back.
Right. Sure. You don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't head down the path and then I'm looking, should have gone left.
Yeah.
Just go. I chose right. I'm going right. Let's go.
Yeah.
And let's just keep marching forward.
Yeah.
Stay positive on it. And even though you're going to have negative days and negative times, Michelle always makes fun of it. She's like, you're always thinking about how you're feeling. I said, yeah, I wish I couldn't. She just lives. Just lives life.
Yeah.
And I'm always thinking about, man, is my knee hurting? Am I hungry or am I not? Am I full?
Yeah.
Do I feel good? Do I feel bad? Am I hot? Am I cold? Where she just reacts.
All right.
This is where, so she's in the car. This drives me crazy. Yeah. It's air conditioner and a full blast or off.
No in between.
Just a reaction. Right. Wait till she gets extremely hot and then turn it off.
Turn it on. Yep.
Or extremely cold and turn it off.
That's
turn the heat on. Because she's reacting. She's just navigating on what's presented. Yeah. And there are pros and cons to that.
But she's being her authentic self, just like you're being your authentic self. You just happen to share it in front of the world.
Yep. Yeah. So that knowing that the type of human you are and can be extremely valuable.
Yeah. So over the next several weeks, we're going to continue just to chase down different topics in business, home theater, garage, life, finance. And these are all things I think all of us can relate to. And just give you a heads up of where we're going next week. We will be talking about why passion alone isn't enough to succeed in business. We hinted on that in a past episode, but we're going to dive deep into that next week. And one thing I would encourage you guys to do is, if you've got a question in these 5 areas, maybe there's a topic suggestion, let us know down in the comments. We'd love to get your feedback, and who knows, that may make it into a future episode.
Yeah, I'd like that. Send us some info. Shoot me, Matt at obsessedgarage.com, and is it Michael at obsessedhometheater.com?
That's correct. Yep. Yeah, cool. Man. But this has been fun. Hope you guys will join us next week. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.